Hi, and welcome to today's show. I'm actually broadcasting this across many channels, and it's completely different to anything that I have been sharing in public up until this point. In the same way that I can read a person, and I tend to work with rationalists. So when you're working with rationalists, that's not easy pickings, meaning I have to prove to myself and to others that I am able to read, because most people that come to me, it's really outside of their wheelhouse. And I'm always working with investors and business owners, and a great benefit to them, and especially when we're working with scaling out businesses and helping them understand the patterns that undermine their ability to work with business. But over the last 2 months, my inner compass has been guiding me to work in a completely different way. And this has everything to do with what is happening on the planet at this point in time. And specifically today, I'm addressing those of you that feel uneasy about what is happening. And you have a right to feel uneasy. And you should honor that uneasy feeling. We are living in a time where we are seeing old, archaic human behaviors arise to the surface. In Jungian terms, we are seeing the shadow manifest. And we're seeing complete breakdowns of systems and structures that we have relied on to this point, which is a very, very good thing, because many of those structures must die. Many of us remember our parents who really believed in the church, thought the church was incredible, and looked up at priests, only to find out over time that there were many pedophiles in the church. And it's not particularly the church that I'm pointing my finger at here, by the way. What we often see is the bigger the front, the bigger the back, meaning anyone that hasn't done shadow work shouldn't be in positions of leadership. They simply cannot be trusted. I am going to be sharing a little bit about an archetypal pattern that's manifesting at this point in world culture that is extremely dangerous. So, for many, they want life to return to normal, not understanding that there will be no normal. And in many ways, those people that want life to return to normal, they're babies in regards to consciousness development. They're infants who are unable to see what is happening, who are unable to connect with what is happening. And this type of person is a comfort seeker. They're not a thinker, they're not a critical thinker, and they're not particularly connected to their own internal guidance system. That's not a judgment, it's just how it is. There are many different humans on this planet and other forms of energy at all different stages of development, knowledge and understanding. And in some ways, all these different energy forms, all these different human beings with different stages of development are actually clashing at this point. On the upside, we are actually going through a cleansing of old, outdated ways of operating and being. And as usual, when we go through these types of transformational processes, there is death, destruction, crises, as new forms start to develop and new structures start to develop. So it's really easy to get identified with what's happening personally and get caught up worrying or going to war or fighting for this or fighting for that. But there's something else happening that's driven by nature, by consciousness itself. It's kind of over old forms of being and operating in this world, which I'm going to talk to you about today. As I said, I don't normally teach these things, but as someone who reads people, and if you've worked with me, you know how accurate I am and how fast I am. That's because I have the ability to go beyond my logic, and I have a highly developed logic. I go beyond it to connect to you in truth, and science will prove this at some point, physics is closest to it. We live in a quantum soup, and within that quantum soup, in the quantum field, we are all connected. And the human being is a receiver and transmitter. You'll tend to gravitate towards people that transmit what you transmit. Birds of a feather flock together, and you form tribes of thinking. And there are many forms of thinking and tribes within this quantum soup. But we are all part of the one, and that's not a mental construct for me. That is my experience. Because when we can drop logic, when we have worked on ourselves to the point where the ego is not the driving force or factor or even the important element of your life anymore, something else becomes more important, which is love, kindness, gentleness, and beauty and truth. And ego games aren't important. And of course, what we're seeing on this planet at this point of time are a whole bunch of ego-identified people gathering in tribes to fight one another. This is part of the sickness. This isn't about COVID, the virus. This isn't about vaccines, vaccination, or anti-vax. This is about human consciousness and where we can potentially go. So I'm sure you're all aware of that breakdown, the lack of civility, the hate, the anger that is showing up. And as I said earlier, I'm going to be talking about one form of consciousness that is arising and strengthening on this planet at this point in time. And that is the archetypal pattern of righteousness. Righteousness is a form we've seen on the planet for many years, over the centuries. And righteousness kind of works in this way. Righteousness is based on the sense that you are right. I am right. And of course, if someone's saying I am right, there'll be other people that gravitate around that sense of I am right. And so we have tribes that think I am right. So it's very easy for everyone to see that we've got these tribes at war at the moment, this framework that's happening around the likes of the virus and the vaccination. And these strong frameworks of I am right and righteousness. But I'm going to work with a particular form of this that is really moving into power. And one of the things that we could communicate about is what we might consider the mother, the righteous mother. So the righteous mother works in this way. The righteous mother, is an authority figure. So in the family, the righteous mother, when the kids are toddlers, the righteous mother has a really good quality role in that, because at that point, the righteous mother should be guiding the children, because the children are children. And so the righteous mother believes she knows. And she guides the kids. And at this point, we might consider the righteous mother functional. However, there's a certain stage of individuated development that happens where the child, who's no longer a child, starts to head into adolescence. And adolescence, that child is evolving and growing. And to evolve and grow must break away from the righteous mother's values and viewpoints. And at this point, it's a strike for independence from the mother. And this shows up in the family line when the adolescent starts to reject their parents. And what they're really doing at this point is they tend to go to their peers. They move away from their parents, go to their peers. Now, that's unhealthy and unhealthy. Regardless of how you view it, it is required, this split away from the righteous mother. And this movement into independence, what they're doing on the unconscious level is fleshing through, well, who am I separate from my parents? What of my parents' value systems will I keep? What will I absorb from my friends, from the culture? And so that they start to separate, grow, and evolve. And hopefully that happens successfully. The righteous mother usually gets challenged in that. So we start to dig into the righteous mother archetype. We see that the righteous mother believes she is right. And she believes she is doing what she does for the good of her family, for the good of others. And in that, she can boss everyone around and say, you need to do this and you need to do that and you need to do this because I know what is right for you. I know what is healthy for you. I know what is supportive of you. And typically, the righteous mother becomes highly identified with her righteousness, her sense that she is being a good person, the sense that she is noble and loving. And anyone that pushes back against that view will receive the righteous mother's shaming. Because the righteous mother must hold on to this view of herself as the good mother who's doing all these things to save everybody else. And in this perspective, when we bring this global archetypal phenomenon down into the family, I know what you children need, what you children must have and must be and must do to keep you safe. Typically within the family dynamic, the child who's trying to be independent and grow and evolve will start to reject that. And the mother will even go to undermine and shame the children in that developmental phase, again, to keep their power. So if we take this out of the family context and we take it into the global situation, we see this manifesting, again, the righteous mother knowing what you should do to keep you safe, what you should do to keep you safe. And anyone that questions the noble mother is shamed because they cannot be the bad person, because their identification is on being the noble good person. So they need to undermine, shame, cancel, stop anyone that questions their morality structure. In Jungian terms, they have no ability to see their shadow. They can't own their shadow. They play moral games, virtue signaling games. So you'll observe this showing up in our leadership. So this is just one form of archetypal pattern showing up on the planet at this point in time. This particular energy itself will always have a tyrant form to it. Remember, in their righteousness, they know best. What you're also seeing, if we bring it back to the family dynamic, is the adolescent who wants to bust free of their mother often has to use anger to bust free of their mother. And they're not interested in their mother's protection. I see this in my own family. My wife wanting to keep my children protected from risks. In her mind, she is the good person doing the right thing. And in her mind, she cannot understand why these adolescents would want to go ride motorbikes really fast or be involved in all sorts of activities that she might deem dangerous. And if we go to my men's work, we now know that this emasculates the male, the young male, who's now being taught by the mother to avoid risks, to avoid nasty things, to avoid viruses, to avoid all these types of things. So what happens in the adolescent stage of development is the adolescent is not interested in being safe, not interested in living that way that the good, righteous mother wants them to live. So this anger energy builds up and they must reject the good mother and start to move differently in the world. Now, rightly or wrongly, this will show up as violent uprisings. And the good mother will be affronted by that. And they'll go, you are not protecting everyone else. You are not protecting everyone else. And I will stop here. That is a very human viewpoint because nature does not care. And this is really interesting. And this is where I will lose people because most people can only see through a very limited and narrow framework and typically a personal one with their own limited time frames and agendas involved in how they view things. But from the level of spirit or the level of nature, nature is not so concerned about protecting what doesn't work. Nature is destructive. We are part of nature, so we see that starting to uprise in this revolutionary movement. And by the way, I'm not arguing for right or wrong in this. We are just exploring what's happening. So these will play themselves out. These archetypal patterns will play themselves out. But there is a calling at this point to another way of moving. So again, and I take real risks. Well, it doesn't bother me anymore in sharing what I share, because when you do a lot of work in regards to unseating your ego identity, you start to come into connection with elements of self that can't be communicated easily, but are vast, immense, and incredible, and beyond the human ego system, because most people are just listening to the human ego all the time. Their ego, they're actually addicted to it, attached to it. Beyond that, we have guidance. There's a human guidance system. And at this point in time, there are guidances around moving differently and working differently, and how we can build less sick social structures and systems. And any of the past, so we just talked about two patterns playing themselves out. We talked about the righteous mother. We talked about the adolescents, aggressive adolescents who's going, we do not want the tyrant mother to be telling us what's good for us. And the tyrant mother is horrified. So you can probably see, for those of you in Australia, see what played out in Melbourne yesterday. You could probably see the analogy, the metaphor, and how it applies to that. All those patterns are of the old and don't serve. They're based on power. They're full of shadow. I started this talking about how, we used to look at the church, and my mum used to love the church and think the church was incredible, and the priest was just an amazing human being. And over time, she found out that power structure was full of pedophiles and cover-ups and lying. And we've seen this since the start of this whole experience. This last period of time, cover-up after cover-up through big tech companies, mainstream media withholding information, lying, mind control that is just insane through the media. And again, some of you that are watching this, you're going to go, oh, ridiculous. Well, great. You're not for me. You go follow the energy that's driving that, and we'll see where that leads you over time. Just believe me, I'm fine with that. I have evidence for all of this, by the way. If you want to know it, I'll show it to you. There's just been cover-up of cover-up. Here in Australia, no one's communicated. I haven't seen it in any mainstream press about the Indian bar, which is top legal representation in India, suing the WHO, as an example. Or the Senate Committee, American Senate Committee, which is as high as it can go, investigation into big tech manipulation of information. All these things aren't communicated about in our presses. So if I come back to the church, what we see with these power structures is, again, lying, cover up. I'm not saying they're all involved with this, or everyone involved with those organizations are involved with this, but it is the human shadow, greed, status. Most people's for pursuit of power is not based on love, truth, and beauty. Most people's pursuit of power is all about ego and egoic gain. And I said earlier on, if you're firmly attached to your ego, you are not deeply connected to the internal guidance system that's actually providing information about how to be on this planet at this point in time, to build new ways of being, moving, and evolving. Because those old past patterns have played themselves out for many, many years. They don't get us anywhere. Any old past primal human pattern of behavior. And when I say primal patterns are always triggered in times of stress and in times of crises. And if you want to take this further, the more you are emotionally destabilized, the more fear is triggered in you, the more disconnected you become from your own internal guidance systems, and we want to bring it to a brain science model, the more your amygdala is triggered and your limbic system is triggered and your reasoning is downgraded. So the present environment that most people exist in undermines the effective ability just to use reason or access an internal guidance system that could allow them to navigate and evolve this with far greater wisdom. And just observe, wisdom is no longer used. You never see it written anywhere, and there's a reason for that. That's why it's called a post-truth society. Wisdom is not held in high value by many people. There's people right now doing silly things on TikTok, right? People watching silly things on TikTok. This type of communication is certainly not for them. Wish it could be, and maybe at some point in time it will be. So at this point in time, if we are able to drop ego and drop into the depth of our being, we will experience that there are other archetypes moving that are actually quite beautiful, quite wonderful, interested in truth, beauty, and love. And those archetypes that are interested in truth, beauty, and love, they show up as energy forms, just in the same way as the good mother, the tyrant mother, the righteous mother show up. But these archetypal energies are beautiful because they're non-egoic. They're through with the human ego. And these archetypal energies are interested in building societies based on love, compassion, and kindness. And you might go, well, that's just idealistic. Yes, it is. There can never be perfection within a community or a group. But if the underlying drive is not the intent of building on truth, beauty, and love, you're less likely to get it and to achieve it. And then secondly, why are you here? Okay, why are you here? So at this point in time, we are living in a matrix of control. Now, that matrix of control is telling you what and who you should be. What and who you should be. And if you buy what and who you should be, because that's what you're being told, and just be aware, you're probably not even aware of the amount that you are controlled by power structures that want you to think and act in a certain way. And that divorces yourself from who you are. So as I said, maybe it's idealistic, but who are you going to be? Because on your deathbed, as an example, how have you lived your life? What have you developed an allegiance to? What have you developed an allegiance to? Is it to an inner calling to more truth, beauty, and love? Or is it to what you're told to be within the power structures? And by the way, you're just seeing the start of a movement that will become increasingly powerful. So you will be forced to choose. Most people, again, are not aware of the power of AI or where AI is even going, because most people are asleep. We have huge corporate companies that have employed people of the super high intellect to develop algorithms that are designed to override your consciousness and steal your attention. So this is the people with the best IQs employed to do this. Now, again, if those corporations and businesses are not based on truth, beauty, and love, and are based on money-making, greed, and control, and let me be clear here, I'm not anti-money. I work with business owners all over this world. Building business is something I'm super passionate about and fun. I've got amazing clients, super incredible entrepreneurs who I work with day in and day out. I love it. But they're not about manipulating and greed, and they're in balance. That's probably the best way I can say. I could communicate that. They're in balance. So this new way of moving, freely available if you're able to drop the ego, is one based on truth, beauty, and love. Over the last week, I've had exceptional experiences where I have been connecting with and meeting people that have incredible intelligences, that are very aware of the sickness on this planet at the moment, and are joining forces with me to do something quite different. And that is to investigate ways of developing new systems in waterways, food management, banking, all those particular areas, and creating systems and tribes that are based on love and connection, that are for the good of the whole and not just egoic around power and status. To do that, one has to do inner work. One has to see how their ego operates, be willing to be truthful about who and how they show up on the level of the personality, to drop deeper than that. And it's only beautiful. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that. I will be sharing more about this. I am starting a new platform called Vortex Rebirth. And why is it called Vortex Rebirth? A very out there and weird name, because people are being sucked into a vortex. But if you work wisely, you can rebirth a new you that's more in alignment with what you really are, and it's not your ego. Self-actualizing, deep sense of gifts that you are here to give and share, to deepen an allegiance to care, love, kindness, and to build new structures based on that. I don't think any of us are going to get away without having to choose how we operate and live in this ever-increasing and complex world where we will see ever-increasing sickness arise within society. But like all times, when you have that polarity, the other polarity arises as well. It will be your choice. So look out for that. If you've got any questions for me, flick them on through. And I will be sharing more about the new platform and some of the things I'm doing with people over the next little while. It's a fun ride. Talk soon. Catch up.